Last winter, I stared at the heating bill so hard that I thought the numbers on it would shrink out of fear of me. But here's the surprise. Our ancestors in the Middle Ages actually had a whole treasure trove of amazing warmth secrets that we've almost completely forgotten. While we sit here with our modern thermostats, complaining about drafty windows, the people of the Middle Ages were masters of staying warm without spending a single cent on electricity. And note, they didn't just sit there shivering in silence. They had a whole arsenal of incredibly clever tricks up their sleeves. The funny thing is, these methods disappeared as fast as your dad's hair when he hits 40. When the Industrial Revolution arrived with its flashy technologies, everyone was so excited that they tossed out all the old tips, like yesterday's dinner. But you know what? Archaeologists recently discovered that some medieval houses could maintain temperatures up to 21 degrees Celsius in winter, just by using those outdated methods. So, let's start with our first ultimate weapon, the medieval hearth. Don't think this was just a tiny fire, tucked away in a corner like the shy kids at a school party. In the Middle Ages, the hearth was the beating heart right in the middle of the home. It wasn't just for cooking, it was the center of life, of warmth, and of the entire family community. And the clever part here is, the stones built around and beneath the hearth were designed to absorb heat throughout the day, like a giant hot water bottle once the fire went out. The stones continued to radiate heat all night long, like those enthusiastic friends who don't know when to leave the party. In some places, heat was retained for up to 12 hours after the fire died down. As for the smoke, it didn't shoot up a chimney, because many houses didn't have chimneys at all. Instead, the smoke slowly seeped through gaps in the roof. Sounds polluting. But in reality, that smoke acted as a natural insect repellent system that kept the wood from being eaten by wood and preserved food hanging from the ceiling. Both convenient and effective. A classic case of killing two birds with one stone. Archaeological studies show that these central hearths could warm an area of about 55 square meters, equivalent to a medium-sized modern apartment. And the floor around the hearth still shows burn marks because temperatures sometimes exceeded 100 degrees. Man. Compared to me struggling to reheat a slice of cold pizza, I'm completely outclassed. But if those great fireplaces still weren't warm enough, then what? Medieval people had a proper community solution. Welcome to the community heating model, also known as communal fires. While today we often complain about noisy neighbors, back then, people depended on each other to survive the winter. Every village had a shared fire point, usually in the square, or a specialized building called a warming house. The warming house? Don't think this was just a pile of blazing firewood. This was the medieval version of a coffee shop, a community center, and Facebook, all rolled into one. People brought their work, shared news, and gossip. The village notice board, and cooked together. Some villages kept a fire burning day and night, with families taking turns tending the fire throughout the winter. They positioned the heating houses so the smoke blew away from the residential area, and each heating point could hold up to 50 people at once. It was far more energy efficient than lighting fires, separately in 50 different houses. But the best part was that in those very places, a real community was built. People told stories, discussed engagements and events, and even settled chicken disputes in the middle of winter. There are records of an incident in 1267. While the whole village was warming up, they settled a lawsuit over who owned a lost chicken. It warmed both the body and the heart. However, not everyone could always make it to the heating point. Maybe, or simply, they didn't want to sit and listen to Mrs. Johnson tell stories about her award-winning turnips anymore. That's when people turned to personal solutions. Hand warmers and pocket stones. Portable heating devices before the word portable existed. Instead of wrapping hands in chemical packets like we do now, people in the Middle Ages used hot stones or metal containers filled with glowing coals, like carrying a piece of the earth in your pocket. The most popular type was called chaud. The name sounds fancy in French, but it was actually a perforated metal sphere, filled with glowing coals and tucked into a coat pocket or glove. The nobility used those made of silver or gold, while commoners used iron or copper. A merchant in an inventory ledger from 1378 even listed over 30 types of different warmers. Truly a variety of products. Pocket stones were even simpler yet effective. They heated smooth stream stones in the fire, wrapped them in cloth, and put them in their clothes or shoes, even in their beds. Many stones found in archaeological sites have wear marks, from being held and heated, from being reheated too often. Some even have groove-like wear, because they were tucked into the same pocket for many years. You might think that's funny. There's a 1422 court case that tells of a man who accidentally took the wrong stone, someone else's hot stone, at a church service. As a result, he was fined and forced to provide hot stones for the entire congregation throughout the winter, exactly like taking one thing and paying back the whole village. Hot stones. You thought hot stones were only for warming hands? Not at all. Medieval people put hot stones in their shoes, hid them in their clothes, or placed them under blankets before bed. It was almost the primitive version of a multi-purpose mini heater. Some even used hot stones for healing. For example, if you had a stomachache, they would recommend using a flat stone. For back pain, take a slightly curved one, like a medieval stone prescription. And the funny thing is that today, modern science also recognizes heat therapy. Heat therapy really does have pain-relieving effects. So even without a degree in medicine, medieval people weren't exactly clueless. But if stones and charcoal still weren't enough to keep warm, then call in the four-legged heating system. And no, I'm not talking about dogs or cats. I'm talking about cattle, horses, and sheep. That's right, livestock were living heaters. You might wonder why medieval farmhouses were attached to the living quarters. It wasn't because the farmers were lazy, but because they knew how to utilize animal body heat. A single cow can emit heat equivalent to a small heater, about 1,000 BTU per hour. Multiply that by 5 or 6 cows, plus a few sheep, and you have a full option biological heating system. Medieval people usually built their houses so that the coldest wall, the north wall, was adjacent to the livestock pen. Thanks to this, heat from the animals seeped through the wall, providing natural warmth for the adjacent room. Some surveys show that rooms near the pens were warmer by about 5 to 10 degrees compared to the rest of the house. Of course, the smell wasn't exactly pleasant, since perfume hadn't been developed back then. But in the dead of winter, choosing between warmth and the smell of cows, anyone would know what to choose. A text from 1382 even clearly states that cows are the best heaters, followed by horses, while chickens are far inferior, like today's USB heaters. They exist, but they don't help much. Even a landlord in 1415 reduced the rent for houses not adjacent to the pens, like a discount for not having a built-in heater. Totally reasonable. But what if you couldn't stand the farm smell? Don't worry, medieval people had a very scientific heat reflection plan. Even though they didn't know it was physics, they discovered that shiny metal and polished stone could reflect heat back into the room, just like throwing a ball against a wall and having it bounce back. They called them heat reflectors, and often used polished copper or brass, placed around the hearth. In wealthy places, people even clad the entire walls in metal. Some were as large as a dining table. In some castles, they even plated the walls of the Great Hall with silver, not just to show off wealth, but also to reflect heat throughout the room. Modern experiments on replica reflectors show that heating efficiency increases by up to 30%, meaning the same amount of firewood makes it much warmer. To be honest, my physics teacher would probably be moved to know that ancient people did this before they understood the laws of thermodynamics. There are records of a monastery that used tilted reflectors to direct heat from the furnace to the infirmary. A true medieval zoned heating system. The monks called them God's mirrors. But I think if God had actually been involved in the design, he probably would have just created electric heaters. But when night falls, and the cold is biting, another trick is needed. The bed warmer was essentially the electric blanket of the medieval world. Its construction was extremely simple. A copper or brass pan with a long handle, filled with hot coals, placed between the blankets a few minutes before sleep. Like making a sandwich, but a scorching hot one. These warming pans were often engraved with decorative patterns, not unlike the gadgets we keep in our kitchens today for decoration. Each use could keep the bed warm for 2 to 3 hours, enough to lull you into a peaceful sleep. The nobility had servants dedicated to warming the beds, while commoners had to do it themselves. Archaeologists even found a warming pan from 1,004 years ago. 35 has an inscription saying good night. Don't let the frost bite you. The ancients knew how to joke, didn't they? Specifically, they had their own way of choosing charcoal to warm the bed, avoiding charcoal that produced too much smoke or was too flammable. There were even bed warmer inspectors, who checked if the people were using dangerous charcoal, just like enthusiastic civil servants. A good bed warmer could increase the bed temperature by about 10 to 12 degrees, turning an ice-cold nest into a soft, cozy home. Records show a noble in the year 442 who used 6 different bed warmers in rotation all night. Now that's sleeping like royalty. But what if there was no bed warmer? There was still a way. Just a bed with curtains, also known as a canopy bed. Don't think this was just for luxury. A bed with curtains was an extremely clever personal heat retention system. The thick curtains around the bed were like a giant sleeping bag, keeping body heat inside. There were bed designs with 2 layers of canopy curtains, and even small slots to place bed warmers inside. Exactly like an ancient smart bed. Modern experiments on canopy bed replicas show that the temperature inside can be higher than the surrounding room by 10 to 15 degrees, and just 10 minutes inside makes it warm and comfortable. Some people even competed to see who had the most beautiful bed curtains. Records from a certain year state that a merchant spent more on bed curtains than on his own house, truly prioritizing a good night's sleep. So, what about during the day, when you can't just lie in a canopy bed or stay glued to the fireplace? Medieval people also had their own tricks. In fact, it's quite similar to today's modern technology. They took advantage of something free, clean, and omnipresent: sunlight. It sounds simple, but in reality, the ancient Chinese were masters of passive solar energy. Long before this term even existed, they built houses with large south-facing windows to catch the low winter sun, just like modern passive solar houses. It wasn't just about slapping on a huge window. They calculated it very carefully. Windows just large enough to let in the winter sun, but still kept cool in the summer. They truly knew how to optimize solar radiation efficiency, without needing a mechanical engineer. The best trick lay in the thick stone walls. They absorbed heat during the day, and slowly released it at night, like a giant stone hot water tank. Many castles even had sunrooms with walls up to 1.8 meters thick. No industrial insulation could compare. Modern surveys show that these walls could retain heat for up to 8 hours after sunset, ideal for long, freezing winters. Some places even built houses offset by exactly 17.5 degrees to the southeast, considered the ideal angle to catch the winter sun. While I'm still struggling to orient my phone to see which way is north, the ancestors of house building were already the ultimate masters of positioning. A lord living in the year 356 even designed small windows at the bottom to retain heat, and large windows above to collect sunlight. Exactly like a Tatir temperature control system. I bet the servants at first thought he was a bit crazy, until winter hit and the Great Hall remained as warm as autumn. But what if it's cloudy all day? Medieval people still had one final layer of protection, something that seemed to be just for decoration, but was actually extremely effective: thatch roofs. You might think thatched roofs were just for that ancient rural vibe. Not at all. Thatch is a top-tier natural insulation material. Thousands of tiny air pockets between the straw fibers create a heat-retaining layer, similar to modern-day fiberglass, but completely natural and not itchy. A good thatched roof can be up to 60 centimeters thick, retaining heat extremely effectively. Tests show that compared to the tile roofs of that time, thatched roofs retained heat up to 50% better. Not to mention, thatched roofs can breathe, meaning they release moisture without letting the heat escape. True intelligence without the need for microchips. Records from 1337 show that people living in thatched houses were so warm that they had to open their windows in the middle of January to avoid being roasted alive. Meanwhile, those in the neighboring tile-roofed houses were still huddling by the fire. Truly top-tier insulation and a miraculous design. And here is the final blow from the arsenal of medieval warming secrets, something that sounds modern, but actually existed thousands of years ago. Stone heated floors. Heated floors. You heard that right. Medieval people discovered that large stones could retain heat for a very long time, just like how Gen Z clings to their phones. So they started heating up boulders, weighing 10 to 15 kilograms and sliding them into gaps under the wooden floor, or under stone benches. Once those stones were heated, they could radiate heat continuously for up to 6 hours, like a mini central heating system. Some places even built integrated stone ovens in the kitchen, similar to a microwave, but specifically for stones. The nobility even had schedules for replacing stones, with entire teams of servants taking turns sliding the stones in on time, day, and night. A villa from the 15th century still has documents showing that 24 stones were rotated, heated, and installed every 4 hours. Truly a precise hourly heat supply. According to modern estimates, this system could maintain a room temperature of about 18 degrees. Even when it was freezing outside, a monk in 1043 wrote in his diary that his monastery used this method to heat the infirmary, calling it God's heater. But I think if God had actually done it, we probably would have had air conditioning back then.